deliver it. Don't worry.
Yeah.
AutoLine After Hours is brought to you by Bridgestone Tires, solutions for your journey, and by Borg Warner.
All right, we're on.
We are.
We're on. Woohoo! We got a show to do here, Gary.
After Labor Day.
Yeah. Wow. Technically the summer's not over, but it sure feels like it's coming to an end.
Oh, I think that the kids are back in school and they marched across the Mackinac Bridge.
Yeah,
it's fall.
The golf clubs go away and the leaf rakes come out.
That's right. That's right.
So the voice you just heard was Doron Levin with Sirius XM Radio. We've also got Jiyan Cadiz from Hagerty. And
Thank you.
So wait, do we ask him about what Hagerty is, or do you got something that you're going to try to stump us
What's
with
Hagerty?
first?
I could stump you, perhaps.
Okay, let's
Perhaps.
let's see if Gary can stump us. Then we're going to talk
This
Hagerty.
this is perhaps the most obscure that we've had. Okay.
Uh-oh.
Okay. So because September 5th was not a big day in automotive history. So let me first preface by saying that. Okay. So on September 5th, 1725, a guy named Nicolas Joseph Cugnot was born in France.
Cugnot.
Okay.
Cugnot.
Okay. So what did he build in 1769 that's considered a precursor to the auto? Okay, and you've got to add some detail to this.
Okay. Do you guys care to answer?
I can guess. A steam engine?
Yeah, a steam-powered ammunition hauler for the Army.
Genius.
No, that's largely considered the first self-powered vehicle in the world was Cugnot's invention. And it didn't run on railroad tracks or anything. So, all the more remarkable.
And this was for the French Army?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, to haul ammunition.
Yeah, tractor.
Them cannonballs were heavy.
Yeah.
Top speed, 2.5 miles per hour.
1769.
1769.
Who were they fighting in 1769? There's another question for you.
Someone.
Germany.
Somewhere.
They're always fighting Germany.
Well, or the British,
Yeah, it's either the British or Germany, or maybe both.
Or they were just driving around in the steam-powered tractor and
Looking for an
But Gary,
enemy.
I commend you for finding something that happened automotive related on this date going back to the 18th century. That's impressive.
Very well done.
But this will be more impressive.
Yes,
than
yeah.
This by far.
Yeah. So for those who don't know what Hagerty is, what's Hagerty?
So Hagerty is absolutely something special because it's, everyone can have car insurance, but Hagerty's, call it claim to fame, is the ability to insure your fun cars. We're about and taking care of the cars that, your babies, the ones that you absolutely love. So our members, they have their primary insurance,
Well,
be it
everybody
State Farm
loves
or
a car.
whoever.
You're talking more collectible.
Collectible, exotic, whatever. What maybe classic to you is maybe different classic to me, but it's your fun cars. And so if it's a Miata to a Mustang to a Ferrari, you name it, that's what our members have. And there's over 2.5 million cars Hagerty insures. So all in all, we've got about 1.3 million clients. And why that's interesting is because we have an ecosystem that keeps them engaged and in the fold of all things Hagerty. We have everything from events to magazines to media. And we even have an event coming up in Detroit that we'll talk about here shortly. But again, maybe insurance hasn't been the sexiest thing, but McKeel Hagerty and the team have done a great job to create this overall environment where people feel special. They're part of the drivers club, and they get to attend events and bring their cars, and it's more than just insurance.
Okay, so before everyone shuts off because they say, Jesus, they got an insurance salesman on there. So we don't watch this. Okay, so you're here largely because of an event that will be happening in Detroit on September 14th, Radwood. And then there are affiliated things to Radwood. So break it all down for us.
What's Radwood?
So Radwood, this will be the third time we've done it here in Detroit. It is the love of 80s and 90s cars and culture. So not only is it, some say it's the malice era of cars, especially the 80s. There's still great cars in the 80s and definitely in the 90s. And it's more than just people bringing their cars. They dress up. So if it's highlighter colors and roller skates and fanny packs and whatever, it's the full-on thing. It's not just about the car. It's the cars and the culture. And that's what people will see on Hart Plaza Saturday, September 14th.
So why? I mean, why do this?
This is, you know what? What's, you know, digging it a layer deeper. You know, obviously, what has been classic to a lot of folks has shifted over time, and now people like me, us older millennials, we really love those cars from the 80s and 90s. That's what we grew up around, and now it's, believe it or not, that's the biggest growing book of business for Hagerty on the insured side. So it is, you know, while it was like 60s and 70s Mustangs, you know, at one point, now we're in the 80s and 90s with, you know, call it Gen X and millennials that are purchasing these cars at a high rate. And we know, we've seen the prices for a lot of these 80s and 90s cars starting to climb really strongly.
So give us some examples. So the only thing I can think of is there was some good Fox platform Mustangs.
That's right.
Buick GNX, things like that. What else?
I mean, love for the 3 Series, the 944s. And then we've got folks that like the more obscure, maybe of that era, right? The Saab 9.3s and whatnot make a big appearance to these events, as well as the exotics of the time. You can't miss a Testarossa or a Countach, you know, and maybe there's something else in the mix that, you know, people forgot about, right? Let's just be honest. There's been some orphan cars since the 80s and 90s that those brands don't exist anymore. So if someone's proud of, you know, when Renault was here and they brought the Renault to
Le Car
to Radwood, hey, they're proud, and we're happy to have them.
Okay, so the day before Radwood, then there's something Cars at the Station.
Yes.
So talk to us about that.
Cars at the Station, we're absolutely excited about. And for those that are familiar here in Southeast Michigan, Michigan Central, Ford's redesigned mobility and cultural hub in Corktown and Southwest Detroit, the train station, as everyone knows it, you know, it's finished its restoration. They've still got some construction, but they finished its restoration. Everyone's been excited about it. Over 120,000 people have attended this since June 6th, just wanting to see and go through the train station. We were fortunate enough to work with the Michigan Central team and the Ford team to become the first public automotive event in the space. And by way of it, this is our pre-event to Radwood on Saturday. So this is Friday night, 3 to 8 p.m. And one of the things that we wanted to look at is Radwood's 80s, 90s. Could we have a far more inclusive car event here in Detroit? If you're proud of your Ford Probe or your Ferrari, great, bring it, because we want car culture to be the common tie which brings people together. We also want it to be the on-ramp for folks that maybe they could care less about cars, but they want to see what's going on because it's at Michigan Central. So we know that's going to be a great community pull, and we're absolutely thrilled to be partnered with Michigan Central, the city of Detroit, New Lab, the mobility hub next door, and many other great partners, including the Detroit Auto Show team, which is helping to bring a lot of the cars into Roosevelt Park from around the city.
And you're getting some Mustangs from the Henry Ford.
We can get some Mustangs from the Henry Ford. And you know what? In the last days, we've had all sorts of folks reach out, proud of what they have. And they want to find a way to make sure that their car's positioned beautifully in front of the train station in the park. So we're doing the best we can to accommodate all these requests. And at the same time, we know it's a new platform, and hopefully it grows into great things in the future.
So here's my question. I throw it out to all of you, not just to you, Jiyan, but what makes a car a classic car? What makes a car something that people really want to own? Because to me, cars from the 80s and 90s, that's just not old enough to be considered, in my mind, classic or anything like that. So, Jiyan, you start. What makes a car a classic?
That's a tough one. You know what? I'll say that's very tough, because it is, it's like every day something now is more classic that was, even late 90s, early 2000s now is, quote, being classic, right? Some of those are 20 years old. To me, it's like this emotional connection to, and I think it's even more so of like what was analog and what really gets your soul excited. And this vehicle has soul, and you're connected to it. And if that's that emotional connection that, you can't find in today's cars, maybe that's classic to you.
Yeah.
I think it has to do a lot with what was being driven by your parents, your uncle and aunts, cousins, people who were driving cars before you were driving them.
Yep.
And you remember taking trips in them, and you had establish some connection with them. So some of these are cars that were being built in big enough numbers, manufactured in large enough numbers so that there was a pervasive effect in society and a lot of people were driving them. And so you saw them on the road and you saw them in your driveway and you remember them from when you went to the beach or when they took you up to camp. It might have been your first car as a secondhand version of it that you were driving. So I think that's how many of the connections were made with these cars. I remember my dad bringing home when I was a kid, and because of my age, it's different than this one, but I remember the 62 Chevy Impala that he brought home. And every time I see one on the road during the summertime, somebody brings out their 62 Chevy Impala, it just makes me connect with my father, my mother, my sisters. I just remember them that way.
So it's entirely a personal thing, is what I hear both of
I
you
think
guys
so.
saying. I mean, because I grew up in the backseat of a Catalina or a Bonneville, and I just don't,
They don't do it for
I
you.
loved my father, but I mean, I'm sorry, it's like that just doesn't do it.
It doesn't trigger memories for you?
It triggers
Maybe
but
bad
I mean, I don't
memories.
look at it. No. I mean, I just don't look at that as being. I think it's something that perhaps was unattainable, that had a certain panache to it, that you look at that and say, wow, that is so friggin' special. That is just something that I wish I had. And you mentioned the Ford Probe, which I'd completely forgotten about. And as soon as you mentioned it, it was just like, remember that goofy color that you saw it changed in the sun, and
Mystic Chrome.
Mystic Chrome. There you go. And so I mean, I can see people saying that really does it for me. And so it probably isn't a classification. I mean, it is a classification because you guys have that in your insurance. You break it down. But for people, I think a classic car is something that maybe has the thing of your father, maybe has the thing of you drove when at that period of time, or maybe it's something that was once unattainable that now there's the possibility.
See, what you guys are all talking about is on a personal level. What does that car mean to me or my life or my culture or anything? I think it is that, but it also goes beyond that, because there are some cars that we might see from, let's say, the 1930s, Delahai's, or other, one-off coachwork kind of cars. And everybody will look at that and go, oh my God, that thing is gorgeous. It's beautiful. And so there are cars that have no connection to your memory or your background or anything, that you go, wow, look at that. And the cars to me that tend to be the classics that win at the Concours events and the like they're big. Small cars don't win. It's big cars. So they've got this presence to them, and they've got dramatic styling. It not necessarily aerodynamic at all, but a lot of sculpture and curvature to it, and or massive performance. And to me, those are the cars that rise above, any generation. It'll make anybody stop and look at it and say, wow, look at that thing.
But okay, but isn't that just purely an aesthetic play that you're looking
It's
for?
a category. I think that there are a lot of
forms?
different categories that fit into what we're talking
Good
about
point.
now. That's one. And I think probably I've been to one or two classic car shows, not as many as you have. Few people have been to as many as you have. If I see a car from the 30s or 40s, I look at it and I'm impressed by it, but I'll probably not be able to identify it. When I see a 62 Chevy Impala, I say, that's a 62, or that's a 61, or that was a 59. And that gives me some satisfaction.
Well, and you're absolutely right. There's absolutely different categories. And, cars can fit into, each and every one of those different categories and still be considered a classic by some people.
And that's what the Dream Cruise is really all about.
Oh, well, what I love about the Dream Cruise, and for those who are watching that don't know what happens in Detroit, but I think it's the third Saturday in August every year, tens of thousands of what we'd all call classic cars come out. 1 million people line Woodward Avenue to watch, and they just cruise up and down all day long. In fact, all week long. But so that's just setting the stage. What I love about the Dream Cruise is I've seen restored garbage trucks, ice cream trucks, chopped and lowered school buses. I've seen half tracks. I've seen, one year I saw a Mercer raceabout, and I don't know exactly what year it was. It was probably 1910. I mean, it was a museum piece. This thing's worth several $1 million that was out there. And then you see things, cars that you go, really? People are into that?
So you guys are trying to sort of focus it somewhat more with Radwood and with the cars at the station. Is that true?
I would say that Radwood has its defined, right? 80s to 90s. That's a sweet spot right now for Hagerty, and I think just overall culture, car culture, and even some pop culture relative to even style and taste today in general. I would say cars at the station is kind of a, you use your Woodward example. It's almost an all call, right? We know that we're going to have a broad array of ages, meaning what's classic to them or special to them is going to vary. At the same time, we know based on neighborhoods that it varies, right? Like, so, we know that we'll get, different vehicles from different areas. One of the things that we're very proud of is we know from our connections in Southwest Detroit, we're even going to have our lowriders coming out of there, right? So we want something for everyone for this one, because again, the whole idea of Michigan Central was to be the center, a cultural center for the city. And we didn't want another event where it's excluding, an elite status of cars. We're going to get great exotics anyway. But what else can the community bring and come up with that they're proud of? Bring it in. Let's see it on Friday night.
So we're a society that's very much caught up in the idea of identity, and our conveyance, our personal choice in transportation is very much a reflection of our identity. You were talking about lowriders.
Mm-hmm.
You talk about luxury cars. You talk about economy cars. A lot of this is about who we think we are, and it reflects who we think we are, and that's why it's super interesting, and I think will be a very good event for you.
So we're hoping for it.
Yeah.
So here's another question. You're going to let anything come in or what?
So we have a process right now, and it's not necessarily filtering. It's more to kind of manage overall car count. Of course, the city of Detroit's proud of Roosevelt Park. They've built this beautiful park and tons of flowers and shrubs and whatnot. And so to help manage expectations and try to figure out, like, how are we going to place certain things, knowing that, let's just call it what it is. Some of these people are going to be in the park for a long time. As the show doesn't start till 3:00, we're going to need to load them in by 10. So we're, not only are we looking for people who are committed and are so proud to display their vehicle, we also want to keep it as mixed and as interesting as we can. So, the last thing I think anyone wants to see is, a whole bunch of Mustangs here, Chargers here, Corvettes over. Like, that's not bringing together necessarily the community in a colorful way that we're envisioning, right? We want to keep it mixed, and as people show up, we want to be able to still accommodate vehicles that, hey, they just got out of work and they're proud of whatever that they've got, and we'll try to get them in either 14th or 16th Street off
what
Michigan
if it's
Avenue.
Some rusted out classic.
You know what? Patina vehicles are a whole class in themselves. So I can't discriminate on that.
Yeah,
But
but there's
we'll do
always
our
the
best.
possibility you say, we don't have room here. Just go park over there.
Yeah, that parking lot behind the other building.
But you guys are making this there are going to be food trucks and there's going to be DJs. I mean,
That's
you're
right.
turning this into like a festival more than a car show.
100%, because yes, we could do another car show parking lot situation. There's plenty of cars and coffees and other things in the area. But one of the things that no other show can claim is that we are in the backdrop of the future of the city, right? The mobility hub for the city. What's happening in New Lab, the 104 startups focused on mobility, material science, and energy. That is a great new position for Detroit, rather than always focusing on muscle cars and roasting the tires and all the things that we look back from, and we're proud of that. But we're in a place that's looking forward, and so one of the things that we're really want to focus on is the news making of that night with the manufacturers against this backdrop. What's arriving? What's fresh? And what can all these community members appreciate that the automakers will give, a 5-6 minute show and tell of what's latest and greatest from them. And we're excited about that. They don't have to have just a media credential to see it. They're welcome. They're welcome to capture it and post it, and we're happy to have them.
So, I brought up the topic of a rust bucket. What do you guys think? Restoration or preservation, i.e., should you get a classic car, tear it down to the frame, rebuild it so that it's more perfect than it ever left the factory, or should you just keep the thing running with the patina of history?
It's a good one because I remember going to like Concours events as a kid. Started, the local one here started in Rochester and then went over to Plymouth. And at that time in the 90s, these cars were better than they ever were new. And I just remember thinking like, because my dad had an old BMW and still has it today, and he never really restored it. It's as it is. And you look at I was always thinking about his car, and these cars are so beyond perfect. The gaps are so tight, and everything's looking so good. The paint's so layered. That's not really authentic to how it was. It's great that it's so beautiful. But I think today I have more appreciation for people that drive their cars, wrench on their own cars, and they enjoy it. There's more to than just parking it. And so, yes, I am for a little bit more used than more than perfect.
Anyone who's ever watched the Antiques Roadshow on public television has seen somebody bring out some old furniture, in King Louis XV era kind of stuff, but they had it restored. And, the docent there tells them, boy, this thing's worth about $5,000. If you hadn't done anything to it, it'd be worth $60,000.
but this goes back to the thing of we were talking earlier about emotions and personal commitment to whatever. So the question is that, are you doing it for yourself or are you doing it for the market? Are you doing it because at some point you may think about selling it, or are you doing it because, this is mine and I really love it and I enjoy it and I don't care about all that other stuff? But there's a whole group of people, God bless them, who basically are, no, I'm going to make beautiful cars. The Delahaye that I have from 1930 is going to just, I won't change it, but damn it, I'll use some modern age wax to wax that thing to make it look better. But what is their interest?
Try to imagine a conversation between two people who have that Louis XV chair. One has it completely restored, and it gives them great satisfaction and joy to know what it must have looked like in that sitting room back at Versailles. And then somebody else who says, I like the idea that this is what it looks like now, 400 years later. And that really triggers all my thinking about what's happened over the last 400 years. There's no real way for those two people to come to terms as to which is right. They're both right. They're both right.
Yeah, my own personal opinion is I like cars being preserved. I like seeing old cars that run perfectly well. They're actually very clean, but they haven't been torn down and redone. Mm-hmm. I do make exceptions, though. There are certain cars that, somebody it's a barn find, right? And it's a rust bucket. And they bring it back to life. They do a complete tear down to the frame. I'm all for that. I think that's great. They've brought back something that otherwise, was just going to rust into the dirt and it'd be gone. So I think it's to your point, Gary. It's different people have different things so that they want to win a Concours d'Elegance. So you bet it's the white glove treatment, mm-hmm. and that car is perfectly restored. Versus somebody like me who likes to know, dang, that car, just make that car is 60 years old and it's just running great. And I love seeing cars being driven, to your point, Jiyan, not what they call trailer queens that just go from show to show and they barely drive 100 yards.
And frankly, that's the beauty of I think how things have progressed a lot. And with car culture, I think there was a time where it was far more trailer queen, garage queen type vehicles. And I feel like, thanks to we'll call it social media, where people do want to see and be able to capture a lot of, even if it's a 250 GTO to a modern day exotic, they want to see it moving. They want to see it used. They want to hear it. Even if it's not theirs, they still want to see it. And I think that's even the ownership now is, people do want to get their cars out because they want the attention at the end of the day. And frankly, let's just call it what it is. It's not hurting their value to make sure people are aware of it.
It's like Jim Hall, the famous car racer and designer, donated his Can-Am race cars to, I think it's Rattlesnake Raceway in Texas, on the stipulation that once a year, each and every one of those cars has got to go out and tear around their track at speed, i.e. the cars have got to be maintained in good enough condition to go out and race. And I love that approach.
100%.
So is McKeel Hagerty getting into the auction business as well? Because I know we've got Bring a Trailer, and we've got some of these other enterprises that really cater to the person who maybe never even thought of owning a classic car, but sees something and it reminds them of something they liked when they were a kid for some reason, and they go and buy it. Is that something he's getting involved
Again,
in?
as part of Hagerty's ecosystem, right? We have media and content and events. We do have marketplace. We have our Hagerty marketplace, which gives folks a chance to, bid on vehicles, right? That other owners are selling. At the same time, we have our Broad Arrow group, and they are, a top tier auction house that is, bringing in the exotics and those hard to find vehicles where, they're commanding premium dollars. That even just recently at our Motorlux event out in Pebble Beach. And it's a very important part of the business, and it's a growing part of the business. And yes, Hagerty's in, because to your point, like I'm a huge Bring a Trailer fan too. Almost every morning I get the email and take a look and dream with a couple hours to go. Does this make sense? But no, I have not bought one yet.
Have you ever had this Bring a Trailer guy on the show? You should
No,
get him.
it's probably a good idea.
If you invited him, I'm sure he'd be here in a shot.
So Jiyan, you mentioned this sort of in passing earlier when you're talking about people coming to the events that'll be happening week after next, so earlier in your career, you worked at Ford. You worked at, I think it was still Chrysler at that time, maybe Daimler Chrysler.
We did Daimler, we did Chrysler, we did Fiat Chrysler, yeah.
And so, you spent a lot of time with the muscle car community at both of those firms, and I'm wondering, how do you see the younger generation when it comes to cars like Mustangs and Chargers and Challengers and so on?
I think there is something to be said about the nameplates themselves. I've been fortunate enough to be with Charger and Challenger for many years, as well as Mustang. And, names carry a lot of weight in this industry, no doubt about it. And, if it was, my dad's always had a Mustang, so I'm a Mustang guy, or however it may be. What's interesting is the transformation of the younger generations to these nameplates, especially when it comes to, I'd say, the Dodge product. Charger and Challenger for sure resonate extremely strong with the younger demographics, and we see it at Woodward. Woodward's absolutely transformed. Woodward Dream Cruise has absolutely transformed in the last years to more modern muscle. Right, here are cars. Maybe not everyone likes to see it, that they're not the quote classics we're used to seeing at Woodward. But there's no doubt that the presence of modern muscle has taken over, more reliable, easy to drive, monster power. And
a lot of criminals seem to like that stuff too.
Oh boy, I don't even want to comment on that.
I'm sorry. I watch the news like everybody else, and it always seems like they're driving a Charger, or they're driving a black one that was going 140 miles an hour somewhere.
Monster power.
Yeah, monster power. And to your point about, we used to say, when it came to Mustang, that, it's an extension of your personality and yourself, right? There's like there's this pride of getting your chest out of I feel like I'm commanding the road, and I've got, my V8 power under the hood, and, you from 400 plus to, over 700-800 horsepower. These cars, can outrun just about anything.
You could use it for good purposes or ill.
For great purposes. But,
the point that you're making is an important one, because I think Dodge and Ford have done a terrific job of making these old nameplates very relevant and desirable for a whole new generation of buyers.
Right. And, one of the, and they couldn't be more different. And so a lot of people like to say it's, Charger, Challenger versus Mustang versus Camaro. One of the things that I give Dodge a lot of credit for is that, whereas Mustang became far more track capable in time, Dodge went the other way to go track capable with respect of owning the straight line, right? And so, and they've done that, and Ford's done an absolutely great job with, Mustang GTD even, right? On the most extreme side, taking the GT3 learnings to build an absolutely world-class GT car to take on some of the high, most elite brands. And again, these are come down to very common, nameplates that we all know at the dinner table, regardless if you're car people or not. So again, these are so powerful from a branding standpoint, and the attainable love that they have is hard to match. It really is.
Yeah. Hey, look, good time for us to take a quick commercial break here. And we got a lot of other things to talk about of what's going on in the auto industry. But first, a shout out to our sponsors.
When the elements are working against you, being confident in your grip on the road is what really matters. Bridgestone Alenza tires, improved acceleration in wet conditions.
The automotive industry continues to evolve, and so do the opportunities to define it. Borg-Warner is your partner in propulsion. By valuing, above all, trust and our employees, we're one of the world's most admired companies. And for over 130 years, we've been building the future of mobility. With the world's foremost technologists and engineers, we will continue to design how the world moves. Let's do something big together.
All right, we're back. Speaking of what's going on in the news, and this pertains to what we've been talking about in a way, it's a good segue. What do you think, Jiyan, of Walter P. Chrysler's grandson saying he wants to buy the Chrysler brand? I think he wants Mopar. I think he even wants Plymouth. And what do you think?
I mean, it's a put my Chrysler hat back on. I can appreciate the love and trying to keep the storied brand relative close to, his vest. But the reality is, and we all know this, the industry is so tough. And you can separate it all you want, but at the end of the day, the scales, scales of economy of scales, scales of economy, the manufacturing needs, the purchase, like there is no way that I could ever see like that kind of standing alone by itself at this point. As much as there's pride that he has to try to believe that's possible, I really don't see it.
Yeah.
And then one of the things that I've always appreciated was I've been through the darkest times of Chrysler, right? We went through bankruptcy. We saw what 2008 and 2009 brought. And when, these brands, Chrysler, Jeep, and Dodge at the time, were kind of left for dead, how to rebuild those brands and what the Italians were able to do to help resurrect those brands, thanks to Sergio. He really intertwined the company in a way that I don't think it's possible to undo it and find the value to really let them grow on their own.
Yeah. I unless the guy's able to come up with, I'll make up a number, $10 billion, I don't see Stellantis selling anything to him.
I think what's interesting is that he has come up with this idea just at a point when Stellantis is showing that it is having difficulty dealing with all these brands. So I don't think it's any coincidence that he's kind of raising his hand at a point when people have said, hey, Stellantis has 14 brands and its profits have just collapsed. Its stock has just collapsed. Maybe it's time for them to sort of trim down from where they are and sell some of these brands. And he figured this out.
So let me ask you this, Doron. So, if we look at Chrysler right now, okay, so you can buy a Pacifica, right?
Okay.
That's it. What is the value that brand has? Is the value simply nostalgic, or from a business point of view, is there something there that I don't see?
From a business point of view, if you're a Stellantis shareholder, it probably has negative value. In other words, it demands a certain amount of marketing, it demands a certain amount of capital investment, it demands a certain amount of executive attention, it demands a certain amount of time from the design studio, which is not justified by selling one vehicle. So as a shareholder or somebody who is interested in an investment, I would say, get rid of it. You look at a company like Toyota, which has 2 or 3 brands globally, and they're doing just fine with it. And then you have Stellantis, which is struggling with 14 brands. It seems like the answer is pretty clear that they've got to, and they have brands like Lancia that people have never even heard of. So why are they doing this?
Well, they haven't heard of them here, perhaps. But...
Well, they've heard of them in Lancia dealerships and maybe in the neighborhoods where Lancia dealerships are located, but lots of young people in Europe haven't heard of Lancia.
I think Lancia is only sold in Italy now.
Yes, I think that's true.
I don't think it exists outside.
So again,
the
you have to
Italian.
ask yourself, as part of corporate strategy, why are they doing this?
Well, because to unwind it is going to be very expensive, and it's going to be politically very, very difficult.
Unless some dreamer comes along with a lot of money,
Right.
and there are dreamers out there with a lot of money who want to own a car company. We know this.
Yeah.
So speaking of Stellantis, I read this piece in Bloomberg today, which I thought was rather curious, that they quoted the Wall Street Journal saying that the factories making the Jeep Wrangler and Grand Cherokee had halted output. And so then Bloomberg News went and asked Stellantis what's going on, and they got the response, quote, production at these plants will resume September 5th, which is today. And the statement that they got also continued, Stellantis continues to take the necessary actions to improve operations in the U.S. market. This included making production adjustments at the Toledo North, Jefferson, and Mack plants. The company will continue to monitor the situation and assess whether further action is required. What does that mean, John?
Further action means they still have way too much inventory. And it's just astonishing to me that they let this get out of control like it has. And so when they say further actions, it's going to mean if we can't get inventory levels down, we're not going to keep on building vehicles, right?
So
got to stop production.
Back in the day, a very talented editor for the Wall Street Journal by the name of Chuck Camp used to school every new reporter at the Wall Street Journal by saying, you got to understand, at one level, this is a simple business. It's a three-legged stool: sales, production, inventory. When one of those legs gets out of whack, the stool becomes unstable. So you're either sell more or you produce less, but somehow the inventory has to coordinate with those two other things. And that's really the sort of the vicious kind of reality that top executives face every day when they're looking at production levels, they're looking at sales rates, and they're looking at inventory.
I know, but here's my question to you then, Doron.
So why have they been dancing around with all these new executives at Stellantis? The reason is because they haven't been doing their job, probably.
Well, I'd like to know how they let inventory levels get so out of hand, because it doesn't happen overnight, right?
No.
It takes months and months and months to get all of a sudden to the point where you've got 100 days inventory.
So nobody wants to go to the UAW and say, hey, we're shutting down this plant. We're shutting down one shift, or we're going.
I don't think the UAW is the problem. I think it's top man, because as you know, you as an automaker.
I'm not saying they're a problem either. I'm just saying nobody at the executive level wants to talk to the people at the plant.
I think it's the executive level does not want to stop production, because as you know, as soon as a car rolls off the assembly line, it's counted as sold.
Correct.
And you've given Wall Street your guidance as to the profit you're going to make. So they're telling clients buy the stock or don't buy it based on that. And if you stop building vehicles, you're going to miss your guidance, and Wall Street's going to crucify you.
Right.
So that's where I think the problem is.
So
nobody wanted to say stop building cars.
You could be right.
So okay, Wrangler and Grand Cherokee. I mean, these are basically the tent poles of the Jeep brand.
This is 5-alarm alert.
So I think what you're seeing is
wrong.
the other side of the coin of the success of the Bronco brand at Ford. I think
Which you worked on, right?
And we have a guy who's here who can talk about it. But I think when we first started seeing the Bronco strategy at Ford, everybody said the same thing. This is not going to be good news for Jeep.
Correct. It is. But what did Jeep do? They kept coming out with more and more expensive models, and they kept building beyond demand, i.e. they kept building more vehicles than there were customers to buy them. And now they're stuck with all these expensive vehicles that they're going to have to discount dramatically, more so than that they've done already. And they're going to have to stop building vehicles, which, as you say, they've just stopped building or maybe resuming today. But the Wrangler and the Grand Cherokee those are the icons of the
Right.
brand. And when you got to stop building them, you're in trouble.
Or as auto executives say behind closed doors, the dogs aren't eating the dog
Yeah.
food.
So Jiyan, when you guys were at Ford and you were developing the whole Bronco thing, I mean, was Jeep the focus, or was it you guys thought beyond that or in a different direction? Or
There's the reality that it had to take on Jeep head on, right? There's no doubt that if for Bronco to be credible, the Bronco 2-door and 4-door had to go against, the Wrangler 2-door and 4-door all the way through, right? It couldn't be anything short or soft of what the Wrangler was. It couldn't be an FJ Cruiser. It needed to absolutely be head to head. And, the team did a great job managing that, right? It took, you guys know the stories of Ford starts and stops trying to bring Bronco back. And, it took many years, what was that, 20 some odd years since 96 when, 24, when the last Bronco rolled off, but the timing was right. And frankly, it could have been better with the pandemic, right? Everyone wanted to get outside, be active, live this adventurous lifestyle because we had lost it for a hot second there. And Bronco made a great answer to make off-road easy, right? It had some things that the Wrangler didn't for those that weren't off-road versed to be able to have some confidence to take off the beaten path.
Stop being modest. I think it was really brilliant. I thought that it was planned well, it was marketed well. And if you think about it, there's nothing top technology about any of these cars, right? It's pretty simple. You tear down one, you figure out what it takes to take it off-road, and then you do it.
Well, yeah, but I mean, with today's off-roading, I mean, the all-wheel drive systems are so sophisticated. And with the cameras, so you can see where you're going or where your wheels are placed for downhill descent and traction and, downhill or, rock crawling, cruise control.
Sure.
The software is pretty intense in these vehicles right now. And but what I was amazed at, Jiyan, is Jeep was so successful. I think, sales peaked in 2017, 18, 2 million globally. And I kept looking around going, why is everyone else letting Fiat Chrysler get away with this? I mean, nobody's attacking Jeep. And then Ford finally woke up to the fact that, we got this terrific brand. And if we bring it back the right way, we can do some damage in the market.
Yeah, there's no doubt about that. It's unbelievable if you look at the history of the automobile that Wrangler has not been challenged for as long as it was. And forget Bronco's important step that it can be done. Now we've got Scout around the corner too. That's not too far away.
Do you think electric will make it with that off-road crowd?
You know what? I think if it's done in an authentic way and capability and ruggedness are true, I think they have a chance. I think their client may be a little bit different, but one of the things we learned with Bronco is there is that segment that Wranglers had. Just because there's the Wrangler buyer didn't mean that there's folks adjacent that weren't willing to come in if there was something else out there. And Bronco did that. I'm not to say, who's to say that Scout won't find their own set of customers as well that want that rugged capability, but as
what you're saying is fascinating to me, because what you're saying, that segment could grow.
And it has. And let's just call it what it is. There's the traditional hardcore rugged vehicles, Wrangler and Bronco being them. And then there's everything else that's trying to be somewhat off-road these days with more, molded in color fenders, a little bit of a rugged tire. I actually like the new Land Cruiser.
No, I'm not criticizing it. I think Toyota's doing a good job with Land Cruiser. It took something that was really a niche vehicle, big and kind of ungainly, but attractive in its own way, and had a small niche audience, and is bringing it mainstream. And it's going to be selling in much greater numbers than the old one used to.
Yeah, I've actually seen quite a few of the new one, but I think there's something American about that segment, just like it is true with Charger, Challenger, Mustangs, and Camaros. Like there's a national pride with some of these vehicles too, and at the same time, it's absolutely an extension of personality. People ask me all the time, or over the years, about you've done so many cool vehicles from Wrangler to Bronco, Chargers, Challengers, you name it. What do you like most? And I say every time, I prefer the off-road crowd. The camaraderie can't beat the track type people. Like you've got people who want to help you in the mud, tow you out. Like there's like a pride to it.
What do you think about Defender?
I I like the Defender. I mean, it's
I think it's
L-
cool.
Land Rover is another
Yeah.
legitimate competitor in this
100%.
case.
They're kind of as original as Jeep.
Oh, they are,
in their own way. I
totally,
mean, they
totally.
really go way back.
But they've
Yeah.
never cracked the code of getting the volume like Jeep or Bronco have.
and they're playing at a higher price point too.
Yeah.
And that's maybe true to their brand, but I think that, you know, when it comes to like looking at the classics, those Defender 90s and 110s are from the 90s are continue to climb. They're great. I love the classic G wagons too. That's another hardcore,
Yeah.
you know, triple locker vehicle that is hard to beat. But there is something to be said about there's the original three, the Willys, the Scout, and the Bronco, right? And then you've had others, right? Like the G wagons and the Defenders.
Yeah,
Internationally,
the G-Wagons are beginning of a tragedy that Shaw never got to stay around long enough to enjoy that one. It was built for him.
Well, see, the thing I wonder about is you mentioned that there was the great timing for Bronco in terms of the pandemic and people wanting to get outside, and that's basically all you can do is go outside. And I wonder, is the pie going to get bigger, or is the pie basically going to stay the same size, and slices will get thinner for some?
I think there would be more derivatives of what is called, like legitimate rugged off-road vehicles, right? Because there's I think people want to own something authentic at the end of the day. At least for those that maybe care about what they're driving, they want authenticity. They don't want a poser vehicle that has cladding and some, colored tow hooks and believe that's enough. The ones that I think will succeed and continue to grow the segment are the ones that are going to go all in, where there is no substitute, right? It's the G-Wagon is the G-Wagon, the Wrangler is the Wrangler, and Bronco is absolutely Bronco. There's, I think those are the ones that can grow. And I don't think that, what call it the source of sales, where those folks are coming from, maybe it was mid-size sedans, maybe it was something else, because they want more. They want to be cooler. They want something that gives them open air freedom. They want to feel like they can take on more and go places that they've never been before.
Is off-road something that the EVs can't really get to because of the low center of gravity?
No, I don't think that's an issue.
Have you seen a Hummer?
Yeah.
Okay, right. I have.
You can go, or Ineos is doing some really interesting stuff too, going electric. I think electric could be part of it. And you know what? There's an appeal to be out in the middle of nowhere, doors off, and your vehicle's not making any sound. I mean, you don't have
Totally
the roar
silent,
of the engine,
yeah.
the whine of the transmission, and the like. You're more at one with nature. Now, I know there's a lot of people who love, the roar of the engine, but there's another part of that who, they like to pull into where their deer blind is without the deer scattering because their vehicle's making so much noise, or they just want to be, closer to nature that way. But I think electric can be part of it. In fact, what I was going to bring up is these off-road parks. So here in Southeast Michigan, we've got one called Hollyoaks. Somebody brilliantly found an old quarry that wasn't being used, and they said, wow, we can make a great off-road park on this, and it has been phenomenally successful. And when people get a chance to really do some hardcore off-roading, I mean really hardcore stuff, which this park offers, it makes them want to buy one of these vehicles and have one of their own. And that's how I think you can grow the segment. In fact, if I were Jeep or Bronco or anybody else, I would be figuring out how can I help create more of these parks.
Yeah, one of the cool things, I love Hollyoaks here north of Detroit. I think, one of the great things that Bronco or Ford has done is built their Bronco off-roadeos, the ability to regionalize opportunities for folks to go off-road if they have a Bronco, or if they, want to purchase the ability to go learn how to do it, almost test drive the vehicle in a legitimate, authentic setting. I mean, what a way to go. Because I don't think once you've done it once that you're going to be like, this isn't for me. It's just a matter of like, how much do you want? How many accessories and things are you going to put on this when you buy one? Because you get hooked, you get addicted.
Yeah. They have to limit how many people, so many people show up. They're limiting it, and it's become a family thing. People bring their entire family.
That's right.
Have
It's
a
an
picnic
outing.
in the middle of the day and go back to off-roading afterwards.
Yep.
Which goes back to your point about community that you see with those people who are enthusiastic about those vehicles.
I would say the track people are a pretty good community.
They're a
too.
good community. Maybe more on the
I'm
ego.
a track person, so I got to defend the track people.
That's right.
All right, so we got to switch here because there was also big news this week when the chief financial officer of Volkswagen held a meeting and told them that the company has a year, maybe two, to transform the business. Volkswagen?
They
year,
believe
maybe
that the
two?
demand will be going down by 500,000 vehicles.
Already has. They've already lost half a
Yeah, they've
million.
lost 500,000, which is 2 assembly
In Europe.
plants.
Yeah.
And they've never closed a Volkswagen assembly plant in Germany, never. So they're facing a big crisis in the government, and they're facing a big crisis with the union, and they're facing a big crisis with their investors. And I was thinking about that when you mentioned Scout the other day, because the other moment, because Scout is really something that is a project for Volkswagen, and I wonder if they'll be able to continue to fund it with that kind of financial pressure at the top.
You know, once you get so far into a program,
Yeah, there's no
you got to
turning
keep
back.
going, right?
Yeah.
So otherwise, you're going to strand that investment. I think they'll keep going with Scout, but we'll see what happens. But to your point, Gary, I mean, this is scary stuff. This is really scary stuff. You know, the European market never really recovered from COVID. The entire market is 2 million units lower than it used to be pre-COVID. Also, the German automakers who have relied so heavily on the Chinese market for sales and profits are getting their clocks cleaned right now. So is everybody else, but they relied even more on China than the Japanese or a General Motors or a Ford or anything like that. And then you've got this transition to EVs, which is going far, far slower than anyone thought. And Volkswagen probably invested the most heavily of all the major mainline manufacturers to get into it. So you got this combination, lower sales, getting your clock cleaned in China, having overinvested, and they're in emergency mode now. This is, I don't like what I'm seeing here. I hope they can pull out of it.
So, I mean, is it conceivable that it ceases to exist, or what it does is, I mean, it also has several brands in its portfolio that it could sell off and perhaps get down to VW brand and say Porsche, and you know, so they have the everyman car and the expensive one.
I think Volkswagen has done really a good job of commonizing their platforms and commonizing their vehicles such that whatever they do for Golf, they're doing for their other versions of Skoda and Seat and the other brands that they bought. They're in essence selling Volkswagens as other brands in other countries, and I think they're doing a decent job with that. I just think that what you were speaking about has really been tough on them. Neither the ID4 nor the Audi e-tron has done well for them, and that's a big hit given the amount of investment they've had. To your point about China, I saw a number today that China is just collapsing, as you point out, for all the car makers, but
The foreign car makers.
foreign car makers, 2 years ago, they were 53% of the Chinese market. They're now 33% of the Chinese market. So it's collapsing and getting worse by the day. And then the one thing you didn't mention, which is very scary, but they don't talk about, is Chinese cars beginning to invade Europe. And that's going to happen. BYD, Geely, and Volvo, which is essentially a Chinese company.
Right.
Well, that's that's another VW brand, Cupra, and the CEO of Cupra is faced with this is a Spanish brand.
Okay.
And, so
it's an offshoot of Seat.
right.
Okay.
And so they design EV vehicles there, and they're building them in China, and now they're being faced with tariffs that the EU is going to be applying. And this guy who is Wayne Griffiths, the CEO of Seat and Cupra, basically said, you know what? It puts the whole financial future of the company at risk if they have these
I know, but
tariffs.
why would you make a decision like that? I mean, did you not see this coming? This is not all of a sudden that the talk of tariffs has come up. This has been in the works for years. a number of years. And so to have made a top management decision to say, we're going to base the livelihood of this brand on importing cars from China into the European market was a bad decision. And what I would also add too is, I think what's happening in Germany is it's the canary in the coal mine. We're going to face the exact same issues here in the U.S. It's just happening faster in Germany than it is here. And to me, this is a clarion call to the domestic U.S. auto industry. You better get a whole lot more competitive as fast as you can. You're going to have to take drastic action.
Tariffs are a temporary measure at best. Biden administration slapped 100% plus tariffs on Chinese cars, and okay, great, so they won't import them. Then there was a report coming out that they were talking about importing them to Canada, which would have been a good backdoor to the United States. Canada immediately slapped 100% tariffs. We've been down this road before with the Japanese. There's going to be a period where they sort of slow down and try to figure this out, and then eventually they're going to come and build in this market.
Right. Look, the tariffs are just buying time. They're not just a solution, but we need to buy time. We need the tariffs now. If you want to see the U.S. domestic industry continue healthily, you need the tariffs. And I think Europe hasn't gone far enough with its tariffs. And if Germany starts closing plants, you're going to see them up those tariffs.
Well, and that's exactly what this CFO is saying. It's saying we've been given some time, but we have to use it. And I think he used those exact words. We have to use that time.
Yeah, 1 to 2 years.
Right.
Yeah.
1 to 2 years. You know how hard it is to take drastic action in 1 to 2 years? I mean, start revamping operations, restructuring the company, closing plants. It's going to take longer than that.
So the head of the VW union, the metal workers, came back and said something to the effect of, the first thing you got to do is get rid of this bureaucracy. I mean, I remember a visit once to Wolfsburg where they explained that everybody in Wolfsburg works for VW. I mean, including the people who make the sausage that they serve at the lunch counters. You got to get rid of these people because they're really dragging down your automotive operations. And at the time they really weren't, but these people could understand what the future would bring.
Yeah. Well, the chief of the VW Works Council, Daniele Cavello, said the threats of closures of plants in Germany is, quote, a declaration of bankruptcy.
Well, she's also speaking
she's speaking politically.
Right. But
correct.
I mean, but this certainly is compelling to these people in terms of their livelihood. So, Jiyan, you were at Daimler Chrysler through the dark days. I mean, so what was it like on the ground for regular people who were working there, looking at what's going on?
I mean, it's one thing. Of course, you keep your head down and you work as hard as you can, and hope for better days. But obviously, the industry is going through an interesting time. Right? We know that there'll be winners and losers and legitimate losers coming up here, to your point, right? Who's going to survive? And it's absolutely what this next wave of what all the automakers are going to have to do to get that right fitness within their companies is going to be something else, because I think what the Chinese can bring is unlike what they've been fighting yet.
So I have a suggestion. Someone needs to tear down the latest BYD dual motor extended range electric that they're building that has a claimed range of 1,200 miles.
Kilometers.
2,000 kilometers, 1,200 miles.
Wow.
And this is the fifth generation, if you will, of the Chevy Volt, which they just perfected and improved and improved and perfected, and now they've got this thing that gets 1,200 miles of range. It's a DMI, BYD. I think they call it the Sea Lion or something like that. And I don't. Maybe they're exaggerating a little bit, but even if they're only exaggerating a little bit, it's impressive.
So you're saying that General Motors or Ford needs to get one of these, tear it down.
Yeah.
Isn't it what is more important than tearing it down is actually building a competitive vehicle?
Yeah. Yeah, well, they might have to go to China to build it.
No, that's not the answer.
No, it isn't.
No, I mean, look.
They might have to go to Mexico to build it.
No, they will to an extent. But to me, this is why I'm so excited about what's going on in the industry right now, because we're going to see dramatic change. There's no way that you can cut a little head count here, squeeze suppliers
something
there, and
there,
think you're
no.
going to manage your way through this. This is going to require drastic action, restructuring of these companies to be able to survive. Well, yeah, and you asked, is it conceivable Volkswagen could go out of business? It is. Not in 1 or 2 years. I think it would take Volkswagen a long time to die, but it's going to be shrinking. I had no idea until today, Volkswagen's global manufacturing capacity is 14 million vehicles. It's selling 9 million. So the problem's even worse than I thought. It's got 5 million units of overcapacity. So it's a lot more than just 2 plants. And that's going to have to get restructured. That ripples down into the supplier chain, and that ripples out into the communities where those are. It's not going to be good.
I'm really curious because for the longest time, especially after bankruptcy, there was always this notion of, at least at FCA, every plant needs to have like a 300K capacity. Like that's the threshold minimum to be profitable, to be running the operations at the right pace. That's like the number. But that was out of bankruptcy. That's 2010, 2011, 2012. So what is it going to be in an EV era to keep at least, how many 2-liter engines do you need, right? How many of those plants do you need? So if you're going through and you're looking at it, it's like, is the new 300, 5, 6, 800,000? I mean, what's the efficiency of what remains to fuel an electrified future?
So
it's going to be a different scale.
The guy you need to ask is Elon Musk about that.
Well, the numbers are clear with Tesla. Tesla started making a profit, net profit, GAAP net profit, when it started building 200,000 cars a year. That was the magic number. And I think 300,000 for a plant is higher than I would say a plant making 300,000. That's making a lot of money. That's probably with a lot of overtime, i.e., over its capacity. I would say the 220,000, 250,000. You got to be at least there.
Which isn't that different than what it was 40 years ago.
That's right. No, you're right.
That was what it was.
The rule of thumb still applies.
Yeah.
That's
Classic.
right.
Classic.
You're right. Hey, look, guys, we got to wrap this up, but this was excellent. From classic cars all the way to the threat to the industry as we know it.
Volkswagen.
Right. Jiyan, Cadiz, thanks so much for coming on the show.
Pleasure to be
Great
here.
having you here, man. And good luck on your events there.
Thank
It
you.
sounds like a brilliant plan.
Hope to have you all.
Good. Doron, always good to have you on
Thank
the
you
show.
so much.
And Gary, we've got to let everybody know, no show next week. I'm on vacation. You've got to go to Chicago for the Machine Tool Show
Conference.
conference.
Talking about 3D printing cars.
Oh, good.
so-
We'll have to get a full report the week after that.
We will.
Okay. Thank you, everybody, for having tuned in.
AutoLine After Hours is brought to you by Bridgestone Tires, solutions for your journey, and by Borg Warner.
No.
We done?
We're